tuned in to The Real and the Raw with Queen Renny.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to The Real and the Raw. I'm your host, Queen Renny.
I hope this week was nothing but success for you. And if it wasn't, I am sending you all the positive vibes and love. So, today on our episode, we, as y'all know, are continuing on with our talk of the walk to surrender, our journeys on giving it to God. And today I'm super excited. I have a special guest with me. She is a friend of mine, a sister of mine. So y'all please shout out and help me welcome Saba to the couch. Let's go.
Good. Happy to be here. Hi, y'all. My name is Saba. I am also known as Sabina. Um, a little bit about myself. I am a artist, an educator. I love to work with the community. I love working with children, and I'm striving to be a better servant of God. And so, daughter, servant, all of the above. And so, just taking this journey day by day, I would say
Yeah.
is who I am and where I'm going.
Yeah. So, okay, I heard you say that you're an artist. What type of like artistry or, what exactly do you do?
So growing up, I started off painting. That was like what I was known for, portraits. And as I have kind of grown, kind of like dabbled in all these other different mediums. So with the grace of God, I was able to study fine arts at Cal and experiment with sculpting and photography and all these other fun mediums. But painting has been kind of like what I've learned to perfect and have been trying to master in a sense as the years have passed. And now just learning to paint, not what people want to see, but what I want to show.
Yeah.
Less about making people look beautiful, but creating a storyline that's a little bit more captivating and having a message behind it. And so,
Yeah, no, I love that. And I will try and y'all, my skills, as y'all know, I'm still learning a lot of these things, but I will try and input into this video some of her artwork, or for sure at the end I will make sure like her socials are tagged and things like that. But make sure y'all support my girl, because like she said, being an
oh,
artist is not like an easy ministry. And so y'all buy her work. I have some and it is beautiful.
right. I'm like,
Yes, it's in
look,
my office and things like that at work. So, thank you for that though. I also, okay, so tell us how you got into working with kids and kind of how that journey started, and then we can really go into like how our paths crossed in that way.
all right. So, I mean, I got started. I kind of was like raised in it, if that makes sense. My mom had a daycare growing up, and so I was just always around children. And then my mom led a lot of the Sunday classes in church, and so I was always around other kids, helping, assisting, whether it was, the younger, usually those that are younger than me. And
Yeah.
then it just became a passion that I stuck with. And so when I was in school, if you ever needed to do any volunteer, it was always with children for me. And then once I had developed this passion of like, I bond really well. I'm very patient. I have this sense of like I feel like my inner child connects with their child, like their current
Yeah.
child, and so getting to feel like I was healing parts of myself while being around them was something that I realized by the time I was in college. And so I did Jumpstart AmeriCorps. I did CalCurate, which is a program on campus where you provide, art classes to schools in Oakland that were like looking to close their art programs. You taught
Wow.
after school classes, and then just transferring into working in different schools. And so I developed a passion for teaching, and but more importantly, a passion of like recreating the curriculum so it mirrored what kids really needed to see in order to see themselves in it and to feel like,
Yeah.
if they're interested, they'll actually obtain it. And so that kind of just spread into me working in certain fields with amazing people, uh, including yourself. That was amazing.
I know. Okay, so yes, let's talk about that. I know it's crazy because I don't even know how long we really technically worked together. But so y'all, Saba and I crossed paths. Okay, what year is this? 2024? Was it 2022?
2022. I know it was in January. Like I know it was the start of the year.
Yeah. Okay, it was either 2022 or the start of 2023. That's how quick like it moved or whatever. But so as y'all know, I work at East Oakland Youth Development Center. So we do after school programming and lots of other things with youth in Deep East Oakland. And Saba came on to be our art department manager. It was like a brand new role, something that we wanted. We knew that there was a need for, and so she was kind of like the first person to step into that. As someone that didn't previously work at the center. And I had the pleasure of being her direct supervisor. And so that was a good time. That's how we really got to know each other is through work. Um, and so I think we were having a conversation one day in my office, and I have all this artwork up in my office similar to like kind of what y'all see in this room, but I have artwork from my brother. And Saba, I think, was like, oh, who painted this, asked a question about the art, and it led to a conversation that I think, I don't know, it was one that like I haven't forgotten. But we sat and we shared kind of like, I don't know, for me, it was me sharing where I was at in my journey with healing from losing my brother so traumatically, and just touching on like the fact that like in 2017 I had a miscarriage, and so she was just able to listen. And it's funny how like her question about who painted this thing on your wall led to us having a deep conversation. And I know I immediately was like, there's some type of connection here between the two of us, but I don't know what it was. There were so many things in our stories that were just kind of aligned. And so I say all that to say, like, what for you, or did you even feel that there was like a connection at all on a spiritual level, or did it just feel like, okay, I met this person and they're like, okay, oh, me too, to a lot of the things that I've been through? What was that like for you?
I think, um, I think that I realized when I was young, my grandma used to say, like, I have a gift of asking. I asked a lot of questions, right? I was known to be very inquisitive, but what was different from other children and then later young adults is that my questions always seemed to like create a space that I would leave learning more that I ever thought like would come with that question. And
Yeah.
I remember being young and she's like, you always in people's business. I'm like, I promise you, I just asked them this question. She's like, how did they get here then? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how we got
Other
to
people
the
business.
I was like, I don't, yeah. She's like, you need to, because I come home and be like, oh, like, I just learned this. And she's like, how did you get to that? Like, that's personal information, you know? And I remember thinking, like, maybe I am in people's business. But then when I go back and I'm running through the conversation, like, I really did not know, like, never in a million years did I know they would get there. And so I think to answer the first part, like I do feel like it is part of that moment at that day. I feel like although this I'm having that moment of like where I asked something, I'm learning so much more, and I felt connected. But I think for me, the moment in which I felt like it was a divine like bringing is when um I don't know if you remember. I think it was like the day that I told you like I think I had to leave, like I need to take that leap of faith. And we were in the hallway when I was leaving and gave you a hug, and I was just like I felt just so like I felt so scared to be leaving and transitioning and not knowing what I was doing, but I felt so affirmed and supported that I was like, I'm letting you go physically, but I'm never gonna let you go spiritually. Like it was like
Yes.
a moment
Yes.
where I was like, oh yeah, I'm forever bonded. Like we're
Yes.
locked in for
And I
life. I'm
think you
not.
said that. I think you said, like, I want to make clear that I have to leave this space, but I don't want, or that doesn't mean that our friendship and our connection is going to change. And I was like, no, I don't think it will at all. And we had only known each other for what? How long were you at the center? Was it even 6 months?
I think it was like if it wasn't six, a little bit shy because like I moved here in June, and
Yeah.
so and I first started in January. I think I like my last transitional was like the end of May, and so
Yes, right
yeah,
before senior. And you
right.
started in January. So just so y'all know, like we had from January, like she said, to her transition in May. And that was our interactions with each other. I don't know that we like hung out outside of work. I mean, we did field trips together, but it was with the
Right.
kids and everything was work related. And so the bulk of our conversations that were always spiritual and God was always in it, they happened in my office. Like, in this space that you would think that people aren't touching on things that are so personal, but we cried in my office, we hugged in my office, we've had like hard conversations regarding each other and the places we wanted to get in my office. And so I think you brought up, you know, there clearly we each felt okay that God placed us in each other's lives for some reason. It was not clear to either one of us what that was, but it was clear like, okay, this is something that like this is a friendship we clearly value. And then you left me, so let's talk about that, and not in a bad
Yeah.
way, right? But what led to kind of your journey out of California? Where did you go, and how has that been?
So I moved to Atlanta. Um, and it was funny because a year prior, literally a year prior to that, I had visited Atlanta because I have a good family friend that moved out here. And she was like, "You should come move here. I think it'd be great for your art. It'll take off. Like I could see you thriving here." And when I came to visit, I was like, this is not for me. Like, I'm not leaving Oakland. I got a spot by the lake. I'm not leaving. And eventually I ended up getting that job at, East Oakland Youth Development Center. And I was like, I'm definitely not leaving. Like, I'm getting paid well. I'm don't have to
Yay.
work two jobs anymore. Like, I love what I'm doing. It's like it's not only like getting to be in the art department, but getting to see the transformation of all these different programs we're putting together. It's like I felt so supported there where any idea I had, I feel like I could come to you and be like, this is something I'm thinking. And you're like, how can we make it work?
Yeah.
So I never felt like while teaching in certain spaces, I'm not gonna list names of schools, but like you're very limited. Like you're under a lot of like rules and regulations of what you could teach and what they're willing to put a budget for. And I felt just like there was no ceiling at EOIDC. So it was such a great experience. But I knew it was time for me to go when I had an art show. And I remember at the end of the art show, I was not happy. I just like was feeling like all these things I feel like had went quote unquote wrong, even though like to the audience, to people that were at the show, they never would have known anything was wrong. But
Yeah.
when I got in the car and I was like getting ready to go home, I just cried and was like, I'm not happy. Like, this is not, something's wrong. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not happy. I love like, the fact that I'm getting these opportunities, but I'm not happy doing it here. And I feel like I'm not supposed to be here. And I remember just asking God, like, just take me out of this. Like, where am
Yeah.
I supposed to be? And my friend from Atlanta called me. And so she happened to call me, we were talking, and I was like, how much did you say if I moved in with you? Like, how much rent would be again? She told me the
Right.
price, and I was like, okay, I think I have some money saved up. I could definitely transition and not have to worry about a job for the first like 2 3 months and be okay. And so she's like, listen, come and take like a real sabbatical. Like, I've worked since I was 14. She was like, just come and rest. Like, she lives in the woods. Like, come enjoy it for about a month and don't do anything but just like enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Just be.
And I didn't know how to be though. I never knew I was a workaholic until it was time to be sitting down in the
Girl,
woods
tell
and being like,
me about it.
"What do I do now? What do we do? Where are we going?" She's like, "Nowhere." I'm like,
What can
"What
I
do you
get
do
in?
tomorrow?" I didn't know what to do with my life, and so
Yeah.
um, it was a transitional period of like having to continuously even telling other people like they're like, "Why are you going to Atlanta?" I'm like, "I don't know. I feel like God's telling me to go to Atlanta, so I'm going to Atlanta." Like, what are you gonna do? I don't know. I don't know. It's like, do you have a job? Not yet. Like, I gave up my apartment. I gave my notice to my job that was actually, a job that I
Yeah.
could see myself like staying for years at. Like, I taking that leap of faith of like leaving a comfortable, let alone the first time I had experienced like benefits and all these great things, and being like, I'm gonna go to nothing where I don't
Yeah.
know what I'm doing and I don't know
Yeah.
how it's gonna happen.
That to me, like when I that first of all takes a huge trust in God. And then though it also makes me wonder, like I so this whole series of this podcast series is talking about um our walk to surrender and giving it to God. And so was that a surrender moment for you? I know you had to walk away from like what you mentioned, friends, the professional aspect, and then we haven't even touched on some of the familiar things that may have been going on that also contributed to you being like, okay, this is something I have to do for myself. But in knowing what you were kind of, I guess, giving up and not being sure of what you were stepping into, was that a surrender moment for you, or what type of trust and faith did you really have to put into God?
I think that was like I like to quantify like moments of surrender. I think that was my second big moment of surrender. Like my first was like leaving the pre-med world after being pre-med for
Yeah.
3 years and saying like I surrender this desire to make everybody else happy. I am
Mm,
something in my heart is telling me to choose art. And I didn't, that didn't feel good, let alone I lost like certain supports from certain family members at certain
yeah.
moments of that time. But I was like, I'm surrendering it to you, God. Like I remember just praying and saying, like, I'm okay with disappointing everyone else in my life, but I just cannot disappoint you. And so if this
Ooh,
is where
wait,
you need me,
wait, because that's a word. Can you say that
oh,
again?
so I had realized I was telling God, like, I'm okay with disappointing everyone else in my life, but I just can't disappoint you anymore. And
Hmm.
wanting to sit with that feeling. And I think what was so hard is because I couldn't hear anything back at that moment. I just
Yeah,
felt like, God, I just need you to affirm to me, like, is this what you want from me? Because it's in my heart and I keep getting a tug towards it, but
yeah,
I don't know what I'm gonna do for a job. Pre
yeah.
med, I know it's a great path. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going next. So I was like, but I surrender it and I give it to you. And it was very hard. Like people say surrendering is like you immediately get the benefits. It was like years before I got a great job. And it took me after graduating like what 2 years before I had a job with benefits and a full time, not having to work multiple gigs of like doing all these things on the side to finally feel quote unquote stable. And now God was telling me to surrender it again and go to Atlanta. And so I'm like, okay, but I'm scared.
Right? But let's talk about that for a little bit too, because how many people will be somewhere, right? Like you said, where the money's good, the joy is there, or seemingly, right? Um, you feel like your passions are being sparked and all of these things, and then God's like, here, I'm gonna put you here, and I'm gonna put your feet on solid ground, but there's gonna be some uncertainty. And how many people, like, if we're just being honest here, like, y'all who's listening, raise your hands, because how many of y'all will move from some place that is so comfortable, and like, where you just feel like, okay, I can kick up my feet and I've made it, and God's like, no, but I have something else for you. And
Mhm.
the fact that you, one, listened to his calling, right? And also like stepped out on it with so much uncertainty, to me, just like you said, that does speak to you being a disciple of Jesus, and fearlessly walking in what that, it doesn't mean that like it ain't been, I mean, that it hasn't been hard. And I don't know who else, for y'all that are kind of in a situation where you feel like God is tugging you to be somewhere else, but it's just so familiar where you are and so comfortable where you are, and you're so content where you are, that you're not willing to go where he's clearly trying to lead you. And like, please use Saba's situation as an example, because she's not where she thought she was going to be. You know what I mean?
Right.
And what is that like? What is it like feeling like, okay, this is nowhere near where I thought I was going to be, and I'm still trusting you, I still believe in you?
I mean, I think it really is the testimony of like what it means to be a journey. And like, I think that's why I've like learned when they say like walk by faith, he doesn't say run because it's not going to be a quick journey. He says
Woo!
walk. And so I'm like, it's every step is like every day you're asking for help and every day you're asking for your reassurance or even not even within one day. I'm like, I start off feeling great. And then midway, I'm like, am I supposed to be doing this? Where am I supposed to be going? Like, I feel like financially, moving to Atlanta and leaving my job where I actually was making, a good amount and coming here and having what felt like the biggest shot to my ego. Like I have never made as little as I did or struggled as much as I had, like, and had to have so many moments of like what felt like little moments of like you're winning and then you're just back down and then a little
Yeah,
and then back down and just feeling like, did I make the right decision? Did I hear you correctly? Like, I feel every time I feel like maybe I should go back, there's like a sign or something. I meet someone random at the grocery store and she was like, oh yeah, you've got a gift. You've got to use that. You got to, and it's just, you're like, okay, thank you for the reminder, God. I needed that. But when is this going to happen? And I kind of want it to happen now because this is uncomfortable,
hello.
like, and I'm like, I could have stayed and been comfortable. And so I think there's a part of me was like the surrendering part comes with the trust of like, best, but also like I'm giving you, I think there's this picture where the little girl has a teddy bear and she's like, the little teddy bear, she's like, I love this teddy bear, but God has this big one behind us, but you've got to
Yeah.
give it to him first so that he can give you what he really has in store for you is where I'm at. But there's a moment where people don't talk about where your hands are empty, where like
Ooh,
he hasn't given you the bigger,
that bigger.
rare or bigger. And
Yeah.
so you're just like, and feeling empty after already having something is like a very like lonely like feeling and I just keep feeling like okay well I'm stripped of my job, I'm far from my friends, I don't have connections out here like I did in the Bay Area where I could just easily pitch to certain people and be in a better space and I'm in a place where I'm now I went from having my own apartment, being independent, to now asking someone if I could stay in their room in one of their houses. Like, and just having to take what like I said, so many shots to the ego of like, okay, I'm letting all these things go because you're telling me to, but when is it gonna get better?
Hello? Yeah. Like we going on about a minute of my hands being empty. You know what I mean? And I'm waiting, like you said, on that teddy bear. I heard a few things. That the situation that you just said of how no one really talks about the moment that your hands are empty and the swap hasn't been finalized yet. That speak and I'm not gonna go into it necessarily, but that reminds me of kind of my really kind of where I am in fertility journey and having experienced pregnancy, right? And so I had this small teddy bear and I'm holding on to it so tight for then God to take it away for that greater, for that bigger, and my hands are still empty. And that was in 2017, but and what you said gave me, just continues to give me signs to have hope, right? Knowing that like the greater is still coming, whether it's there or not. God is still standing there waiting to hand you this beautiful teddy bear that is double in size, triple in size, and so much more valuable for you to really rest in. um and it made me also think too that like your move to Atlanta might not be for anything other than growing your faith, because sometimes like you said, that ego death allows you to go into your next step in faith, because I mean God says it, death to self and taking up your sword is something you have to do every day. And your journey also made me think of like Job and Job's story about how the devil came to God and was like, yes, if you take all of his stuff, he'll basically turn on you. And God's like, nah, not my servant. He's faithful and he's a righteous man. And God, like you said, took away your comfort zone, took away your ego, took away the paying job that you could sit comfortably in, and has put you in a place that's so uncomfortable. And right when you feel like you're about to be on level ground again, like you said, something crashes. And you still say God is good. You still walk around with that smile on your face. You're still holding on and having hope and sharing your story for others to recognize that there's hope in theirs as well. And yeah, that was what I was just like, okay, I hear that, like, okay, maybe the move is for nothing other than you being building up your faith and being an even better Christian than, where you could have gotten in California at EOYBC, right?
In my comfort zone. Like that was my comfort zone, you know?
Yeah,
And I think too when we talk about having that moment when your hands are empty, one of the things I really learned was like, um, I always wondered, I went to a church and everyone puts their hands up and they're doing this and they're doing that. And I'm
yeah.
like, what are y'all doing with your hands? Like, we don't do that in the church. I was like, I don't know what we're doing. And it feels weird and uncomfortable. But I had this like epiphany of realization of like the reason why a lot of people do is like you're saying that like anything that you put in my hands, I'm willing to give back to you. And everything that you trust me with, I'm willing to return. And so the biggest lesson I learned of having that empty hands with realizing like, the teddy bear gives you comfort. The teddy bear makes you feel, protected. But when you have nothing in your hands and you still are protected and you still are loved, you realize like this really wasn't the source of where that came from. And so when people put their hands up, they're saying like, you can give me whatever you want to give me, you could take whatever you want to take from me, but I will still feel supported and loved and cared for because I know it comes from you. And like you're just like Job was literally how I felt, especially after my brother's passing. I felt like you, like, I think when I read the story, he says, like, as God giveth, God taketh, So it was like,
Yeah.
how can I be mad about the God that gave me everything, but then be over here, like, um, when he was giving me all these things, I was praising him. But when he takes them away, like, am I supposed to like
Yeah.
be hating on him now? Like, none of these things were mine, and so he just loaned them to me to have for these moments and
Took the
steward over
words
them.
right out of my mouth. I was just gonna say because none of it is ours, and when you were
Right.
so busy chasing the gift, you miss all the glory and grace of the gift giver. And that's what we have
Right.
to keep in mind. And I feel like that applied to me again with fertility. Like God wants to make sure that I'm not going to be holding this child on a pedestal because at the end of the day, that child belongs to him, and I'm just doing the earthly task of keeping them safe and protected here and leading them, down God's path. And yeah, that is so true. And I think too, and I heard you say it, and I want to go into that, is that there were multiple factors that played a role into you moving to Atlanta. And a lot of the conversations that we did have in my office were around our family and how close we were to our family, our mothers, our brothers. And that was when I shared with you, the impact of my brother's passing, and how traumatic it was to experience. And I sat and cried, and we shared the joy and the love that we had for our brothers in that moment. And I think that was a part of our connection as well, is knowing that we had these people in our lives that heavily shaped who we were. And for me, my relationship with my brother was where it was because he was no longer here on earth. And I know for you, there were situations, you right, or circumstances with you and your brother that kind of launched you further into knowing that okay, you had to take this leap of faith.
Right.
um and I kind of, where you feel most comfortable, right? Touching on kind of where things were family wise that helped you recognize that this is something you had to do for you.
I mean, I think for me, it came down to realizing like, so my brother had went to the military, and then when he came back, he was like suffering with PTSD and um just and like major depression. And I remember for the longest time feeling like I need to stay close to home. Initially, because my grandma, had cancer. So I was in
Yeah.
college. I was like, I need to find a college that's within a proximity of, an hour or so away. So if anything happens, I can be home. But then when eventually my grandma passed, and then I was like, okay, well now I can move and try to like see the world. But then my brother came back home, and he was not mentally doing well. And, we got him into VA housing, and it sounded like things were going well. But then I was like, okay, well, I cannot live the rest of my life tied to one place because out of this fear that these people need me, and I never know when the moment is going to come that they're going to really need me. But I'm just
Yeah.
sticking around in case if anything happens. Like if emergency happens, I'm like within a
Yeah.
car ride's way of like just being able to go home. And there had been so much of the years right before moving where I had really kind of like my mind and my soul were tied to his prosperity or his safety or his well-being, that it like drained a lot of me that I didn't know I was sacrificing in the midst of that. And so when he finally was like the most situated he had ever been and stable, I was like, okay, well, he has a house, my mom's here. I think that this might be the one time that like I should go, like I I don't know if it's going to get better, but I do know that I've known what it's like to be worse, when he was kind of like, you know nomad and just going place to place, and I not knowing where he was going to sleep, or knowing when he was going to call me and say that like I need money for a hotel because I'm in Utah, and I don't know how he got to Utah, but he's in Utah, and he's like, but do you want me to sleep on the street? And I'm like, no. So feeling like I need to work and do all these things, and having that stress of like him having his own like panic attacks and all of these things, and hearing things, and trying to learn how to speak him through them. And it was just, this was like the most ideal scenario at the final. What felt like, he lived right across from the VA hospital. If anything happened, he's in good space. Everyone there was very supportive, being in the VA housing. Like, I love like the fact that everyone that lives there and works there supports the community, and they all know each other really well. So it's like, you're good. So I need
Yeah.
to, go figure out what I'm supposed to do, in case, like, in the back of my heart, I just kept feeling like there's a chance he might not get better. And I need to like really put myself out and try to propel as far as I can, so that if that's the case, I have a house for him. I have
Yeah.
maybe even a rehab center ready for go, and
Outlet.
anything that he needs.
Yeah.
And so that was like the mindset of like where I was like, okay, this is the time. Like I need to be okay with just like, breaking the cord that I had attached to him of thinking that I need to stay close to help and being like, you're good right now. I need to spread my wings and, if anything, I'll fly back. But I never in a million years thought like I would be flying back for a funeral. Like I never thought I would leave to come back to not having what I thought would like be I'm coming back to help. I'm coming back to put you in a
Yeah.
better place. I'm coming back to I just never thought that in a million years. Like it was just like what felt like the biggest shock in the sense.
Yeah. And I think for me, and just so y'all know too, with our brothers, they're both right. I have this correct. They're both our older brothers.
Hmm.
Yeah. So both of our older brothers. So we're the younger sisters, but the type of sisters we are, we will do anything and everything for our brothers. And so I remember, like we said, we had the moment where it was clear to us that these were both people who held such high regard in our lives. And I remember it, once you made that decision, it was very hard for you to know that not like you were walking away from him, right? But that you had to go on this adventure for yourself. But in the long run, it was to have a better circumstance for the both of you. And
Yeah.
I know we keep talking about those surrender moments, and I can almost guarantee that even though you knew he was in a good space, you were still going to be somewhere that you couldn't just get to him immediately. And I know that probably was another surrender moment between you and God. What type of like feelings were you experiencing? Any feelings, anxiety around like just the separation factor itself?
Um, I think at times I did, but I think at times I did. I think the hardest part for me was like wondering whether or not like um if I would ever be able to like fix
Yeah,
like no matter how much money you have, like mental health is something that like some people could never put a price on and never fix. And so I was like, I don't know if me going, I just kept wondering, like, I don't know if me even moving is ever going to help anything, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to ever solve this. And I think that feeling of defeat of thinking like, I'm staying here and I'm working well and I'm doing this thing, but I'm not changing the scenario in which I'm in was kind of
yeah,
like breaking my heart enough. I was like, well, at least if I leave and I tried to do something for the bigger, I could say I tried.
yeah,
And the distance, like I just really had to have the faith that like because he kind of calmed down. So for like the previous like 8 months, he never needed anything. He was doing good. So I'm like, this is a really good season for me to go. And I'm hoping that God just continues to be with him. He's not tripping out. He's not having these like, these like phone calls in the middle of the night with me anymore. So I'm like, it seems like the community's helping. My family's checking in. He's back home in San Jose. So we have a whole like my aunts are there too. So my cousins are there. So I'm like, this is the one time I'm like where while they're here, I need to try to like figure things out
yeah,
because they're not going to be here forever to do these things. They're going to eventually move on with their lives and or like maybe new locations. So I was like, I need to maximize on this, but it was scary. Like I think I just have to trust that if God, if you had them the last few months, please just keep them protected
right,
while I'm gone, and
right.
yeah, just keep him in a safe and supported space as much as possible was like the prayer.
Yeah. And then, so I know for me, when I lost my brother, I questioned, I was angry, didn't understand why. Um, did you experience some of those things, especially in, or just what kind of conversations were you having with God, right? I don't know exactly how you necessarily found out, right, that your brother passed. I don't know that this is, whether it was a phone call, right? But I think from when I don't know why that's gonna make me cry, but I think for me, I saw you make a post. There was not much context behind it. There was just a handsome young man in a military uniform, and I think there was either a song behind it, a heart, or something. And and literally, God, I don't know, but I just knew what it was in that moment. I don't know if it was the spiritual connection. I don't know if it was just me putting the links from all the conversations that we had, and I saw military and he was a younger man. I don't know what it was, but immediately my heart knew that you were feeling pain relating to your brother. And I think you hadn't made it known to anyone, or at least not through social media. And I messaged you, and I said, I'm so sorry. I love you because I know how much this hurts you. And that's when you told me and things. But I think I immediately got worried because I said, I feared that you were going to blame yourself for like, I had this immediate thought of like, damn, so I was going to be like, I moved and then this happened, and I just didn't want you to carry that burden. Because even though it happened differently, I carried some of that with my brother, and I was my immediate thought that like, damn, you struggled to step out there, and then this happened, and I was just like, I hope you don't go through the how could I, if I was home I could have done and da 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 da. And I know I couldn't have taken that away from you, but I just wanted you to know that like I saw you in that immediate moment, and I wanted you to know that like someone felt you, heard you, saw you, and was praying for you in the best ways because I didn't want you to go there. Um, but did you, like what was that like for you, that experience?
Right. I think so. I didn't have a moment in which I questioned like God's existence. For me, it was like I got a phone call from a family member. They're like, "You need to hop on a flight and come home." I was in a meeting, a Zoom call meeting with my job at that time, and I remember hopping off the call and telling my boss, like, he's asking me, "I think someone just died," and he was like, "Why? Like, don't say that." And I was like, think someone just died. And I call my cousin because everybody else, nobody wants to tell you over the phone. And I called my cousin. I was
Right.
like, keep it honest with me. Like, is it my brother? And she was like, I could hear her moving around. And she eventually like steps outside, I guess, because she was around people. And she was like, listen, they don't want to tell you until you get here. But it was like, and I remember like, just, I remember just crying and get off the phone. I got a ticket by the grace of God immediately. But I remember just like my go-to reaction was like I remember I got on my knees and I was on my apartment floor and I was just like crying, asking God, like, listen, I'm gonna ask you two things and I
Yeah.
hope you choose one. I say either you bring this man back to life if he's really gone, like you bring him back to life and you grant me like the one wish. Like I feel like I've been, you know what I mean? Like I ain't been asking for a lot, but I'm like, I just you bring this back. Like you make whatever happen be a joke or whatever, and I show up and it's not what it is, or you give me the peace to accept what is happening. And
Mm,
cause I really feel like I'm about to go home to like a war zone of like it's not just me that feels guilt, it's my mom feeling guilt. And then with my mom feeling guilt, there's no room for my guilt. There's no room for my grief because hers is so loud. And so
it's
I just was
that.
in the background helping. I touch down and I'm helping plan, I'm helping facilitate, and it's a lot of like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do that, and I'm like, I think what I look back and I'm so grateful for it with that prayer was that I feel like that God answered the peace part because I was so calm, like I was just like I wasn't frantic, I wasn't like and all over the place, but I felt like I had to be strong for the people that was breaking down around me. And so we got as much as we could together, his paperwork, etc., and just start planning. And it was like a go mode of just like trying to get everything going. And then I remember after like being there a few days, they said that the funeral wouldn't happen until like the end of the month. And so I was like, well, I can't stay out here the whole time. Like I was like, I
Yeah.
gotta go back. So I was like, I went back and I think it started hitting me a little bit, because as I'm writing his obituary and I'm prepping and getting his paperwork from the VA, like I'm trying to plan a veterans memorial and I'm trying to do all these things. I'm just like, oh, I'm really planning this man's funeral. Like something's not, coming together. And then I eventually come out for the funeral and I remember that was a weird time too because my birthday's the 31st and they're telling me the only available date to bury him is the 30th. And so I'm
Okay.
like, okay, well, I'm trying to talk to my family, but they're like, this is just what works. Like, this is when they say they have available. So I was like, okay,
Mhm.
well, I got to eat it then because I'm just one person. Like, if it works for everybody else, I'm just one person. So I just got to like let this go.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it'd be too hard until, the day came. And I think as we're there, I'm like, yo, this is really hitting me. Like, this is really, really happening. And then we didn't have like, like a final goodbye or any of those like open caskets. Like, none of that was, you know, an option. And so I think that I didn't really get to see him. So I just kept thinking about like the last few conversations I had, and just like trying not to kind of like let it eat me of feeling like I had failed, that I had so many, like, you have people have dreams of weddings, people have dreams of like children. I had dreams of helping my family. So it was like seeing what was like my drive of like, okay, I'm gonna get him a house. I'm gonna build a rehab center. I'm gonna get him the help he needs. I'm gonna do all these things. Like it was like a checklist. And if the person's not there, how you gonna do that checklist? Like
Yeah.
your checklist is gone. Like you might as well throw away the whole list. And
You're
so it was
building a
like,
life that because of the death you won't have a chance to step into. And like
at
coming
all,
to terms with that reality is hard as hell.
at all. Like it, and it was. I think I didn't really feel like I broke down or even had a crying moment until the next day. Sorry, my God, the next day, obviously, so leading into my birthday, we had a candle lighting, all his friends and everything. So we went from lighting a candle for him that night in the apartments that we grew up at, which was like it was like a full circle moment with all his family, friends, and all that, to them singing me happy birthday. And I remember just feeling like, oh my gosh, it's my fucking birthday. Like it's my birthday. And then the next day, they brought me a cake, and I had friends that singing me happy birthday. And it wasn't until like time to blow out the candles. I'm like, usually on my birthday, like I wish for something like, for my family. And it was the first time I was like, oh my gosh, like the people I love respectfully almost the most in the world, like, are gone. I'm
Yeah.
really alone in this shit, like, and I'm blowing out my candles and I just started crying and I couldn't control it, but I was like so sad. Like, I'm I'm blowing out my candles after burying my brother. Like, this is a weird, like a very weird feeling. And I'm just like trying to keep it together because again, I was like, I gotta be strong. I gotta be strong. And everyone around me is just like, that's okay. So again, I'm like, I don't even I don't even know how much you guys don't know it's not okay. Like it's not okay. Like my world is crumbling, but I'm a stoic face. So like nobody can see that I've just lost like my what felt like the light at the end of my tunnel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going back to work in a city where what am I working for?
Yeah.
What am I trying so hard for? What am I like? What is my new goal now? Because I've never knew what it was like to put myself first, or like that I was the goal, or any of those things. So I was like, what is the current goal? That I'm like, I did not know. I just felt so lost. But God was so good throughout all that. He kept me so strong. I didn't break, even though I feel like to those that mourn, I think you should mourn and you should experience. But
Yeah.
like my family really needed someone to be strong because my grandma was like they just needed a strong person. Is what it felt like. So I felt like I had to take in that spirit, but it was like it wasn't something I had to fake. It was like some peace that I was like beyond
Yeah.
me. Like it was beyond, and I knew it was the prayer I had said. And so when I got back, ironically enough, it wasn't until I was flying back after the funeral that my body gave out, and I like all of a sudden was sick. I was on the flight back, and I was like, I'm feeling sick. I'm feeling sick, and it was so phenomenally crazy. I was on the flight back, and I had a layaway in Texas, and I end up on the way to Texas being sat next to a veteran, out of all people, young man, and he starts talking to me, and he's like, "Hey, how's your day going?" Like, "Da, da, da, da." And we're just talking, and like I said with you, like I ask a question, and it opens up everything. I ask a question with this man, and I end up learning about his PTSD and his struggles after seeing someone that he loved while training die, and feeling the guilt of survival. And I was thinking to myself, like, is that what I'm struggling with? Like, is it the survival guilt of like I'm alive and I'm still doing these things and you're gone? Like, and but yet, like, I felt like we were gonna be doing life together, and so
Yeah.
it was that whole expectation thing of, like, having to release it, and I'm talking him through I'm asking question after question after question, and what melted my heart is that he was like, "Oh, you must know about the military, like, you must have somebody in the military," and I
Mhm.
have the heart to tell this man I just buried my brother, so I said, "I do, my brother was in the military," and he was like, "Oh, like, what did he do?" And I have his paperwork, so I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, but this is his paperwork." So he
Wow.
was so it was so divine because he ended up going through the list and reading through what my brother did with aircrafts and all the
Wow.
awards he got and what they meant, how many men he led, and just all these things that I never knew because I didn't understand what these numbers meant. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, oh, A13, I don't know, you know. But he just read through everything for me, and then he was like, "Hey, there's a Facebook page that would like, that veterans have like that you should look into, like, all these things." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll look into it later." And we end the flight again. At this point, I'm starting to feel sick, and I'm like, I have a layaway, and so I'm like, "Oh, okay." So we're talking, and he's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know, like, I've been in therapy for months, like months, and this conversation alone was probably the most healing thing I've had out of all the things I've ever been in." And I was like, "That's crazy. I'm glad you felt it because it was with me too." Like but I just
Yeah.
couldn't tell him that he died because I felt like at that moment I was gonna break. If I tell one person, if it comes out of my mouth,
Yeah.
I'm gonna need this stranger to hold me. I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna sob on this plane. So I was like, "Oh, I can't. I'm gonna keep it strong." So I go to the like waiting area while I wait for my next flight, and my body immediately gives out. I've never slept in an airport, but I slept in an airport that day, and I was like sick. My head was spinning. Then when I got home, I was like in bed for weeks, and I just was like crying, and I felt like it was like every part of me that had been strong for the last 2.5 weeks of putting it together and doing it just like gave out and
Yeah.
nothing to give to anyone. And I like was so grateful that I had no obligation here of being so far where no one could like I had to put on a face for it and I had to be strong
Yeah.
for it. And so I was like, God, I don't know why you brought me here, but I'm so grateful I have this space right now of like where I can kind of retreat in my cave and like recharge and let what happened really.
Process and not have to worry about, like you said, holding other people's guilt or feeling like you can't express your pain to a certain extent because, like you said, your mom, and there's just so many factors. And people say, "Oh, God works in mysterious ways." I always say, like, God works in the best ways because not only did this happen to you, but He still made sure He took care of you, provided for you, and built in like little pockets of comfort through the guy on the airplane, or just having that layover so that you had the moment to process alone in with him. um yeah, I and it's to me though, I didn't even have all of those details that you just gave. And first of all, thank you for sharing, because I know, yeah, how difficult that pain is and to speak on it because it doesn't go away. You just learn to live with it. And so thank you for sharing. And it just speaks more volume to me on why our relationship is so valuable and why it is so divine, because I know exactly what that's like in terms of planning the funeral, things like that. But also, you know, for you it was a birthday. For me, the day after we cremated my brother was my graduation from grad school. And no, the same day, not the day after, the same day we cremated my brother. So we went to cremate him. I came home and I was supposed to get ready and go to this graduation. And I just remember getting back home and being like, I don't want to get ready. And everybody's getting ready around me and like, okay, come on, you're gonna be late if you don't like get some pep in your step. And I just remember crying, saying, like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go because a lot of the things and a lot of the goals that I had were around making my brother proud or around things that he instilled in me. Basketball. He was just smart as hell. So I'm like, I want to be educated and just all of these things that I wanted to mark off because he either had done it or had told me about it or whatever. Or I just wanted to make him proud. And so I'm like, what do I look like? My brother was the photographer in the family. What do I look like going to this graduation, looking up in the stands and like not seeing him, not having a moment to smile at his camera. And I had that moment there. I pushed through by the grace of God. And I went to the ceremony, and though I had the moment where I'm looking and I'm just like you said, like, this is for real. This is my life now. And having to really come to terms with that. And sometimes, like, it's been 5 years, almost yeah, 5 years since my brother passed away. And I still have those moments where I'm like, oh, he's for real gone. Like, this is real. I have to go the rest of my life like this. And I had to have moments of joy and sadness, and him not be there to just experience life with me. And I think that was the hardest part of my walk to surrender and giving it to God and being like, I will never fully understand. And there has been so much good that has come from this, to where I can still
Mm.
see that your hand was in all of this, and that, my brother's death will never be in vain because of Change for Sean and the work that we're being able to do for that. And that is God showing me that even though the world may take things from you, I will still be your ultimate provider and gift giver. And obviously we have my niece, and so I'm able to just experience my brother in a completely different way, shape, and form. And that's been amazing. But for you, as we kind of wrap up in a sense, I want to know kind of what you learned from this experience, or in giving this to God, right? Where are you at in your journey in giving, losing your brother and having to live life without him? Where are you at with giving that to God? What lesson because they always say there's a lesson, or there's God is growing you in some way at all times. And if you feel like that is the case in this situation, but yeah.
It was like I couldn't be everyone's savior. I had to
Mm,
kind of like surrender I realized like when I was mourning, the biggest anger thing I had was, but I was supposed to do this and I was gonna do that and I wanted to do this. And it was like a lot of I's. I. And I was like, God, like I re- it's not my place to tell you how to run, the
yeah,
show. And
yeah,
if it was his time, it was his time. There was nothing I could have done to change or alter or, transform that or convince you otherwise, right? Like there was obviously something where you have to just have that faith that like you do everything for in a way in which while I might not like it, but it's for my good. And so I think it was just trying to like accept that, but feeling like my ego just was like, but I was supposed to help and
girl, tell me
I
about
was supposed to I was supposed to save him. And I was like, I was supposed to save him and bring him back into, you know, having a family. And I wanted to see him get married. And I wanted to see him do all these things and get him a job, do all these like, what feels like a normal life that I was supposed to like help him have. And
it.
I failed. And I was like, I was supposed to do these things. And I felt like I was like, who told you that was your job? Like,
Yeah,
you took on this role, but that was never your role to play,
this,
And
yeah,
so I had to really accept like I can't say that you run the show if I'm trying to tell you how to call the shots. And so I had to just be like, okay, well, if this was your plan, I accept it, even though it is a very uncomfortable and painful experience. Like you said, it's a daily, like, you don't ever stop because then there's always like new things that remind you of things that you're not going to get to experience. And I'm
ex-
like, I don't even realize what hurts until you're in a space where I think I was at a wedding and I heard the younger or the older brother giving a speech for his younger sister's wedding, and I was thinking I'll never get that. He'll
yeah,
never like he's gonna be one of those people that are on the table. They have the table of people that passed away that couldn't make it, like that they passed. Like I was like, my brother's gonna be on the table and
that
not
was
like
I got my brother passed away in April of 2019. I got married in August of 2019, and he was supposed to, like you said, I had plans with him. He was supposed to do my first dance, and with me instead of my dad. And it turned into, like you said, we had pillows that had his picture on it, and he was sitting there and things like that. And yeah, no, yeah, I feel you.
that was hard. Like that, I can only imagine how hard that is too, especially having you actually got married. I'm like, I'm just thinking about what am I gonna do when I get married? Like, I'm thinking about the future, but I didn't even know until I saw this woman having this great experience, and I'm like, my grandma's not gonna be there, my brother's
Yeah,
not gonna be there, and I'm like, my immediate family is just like, we're just getting more like this and this and this, and I'm like, but I think what I want to acknowledge too is like when I came home, I was able to really see how tight my extended family was and how supportive my cousins were like lifesavers during that times, and they brought so much happiness during a time that was so sad that I didn't even know I could like experience happiness. It was them that was like making me
Yeah.
laugh and
Yeah.
supporting me. And I think it was crazy. I remember at the church, one of my cousins couldn't make the church, but he came to the burial. But at the church, in my speech, I mentioned like playing horse with my brother and how like I used to learn to. I just wanted to play so I could be him. I just wanted to be a better shooter than him. And then I get home. I get to my cousin's house later that night after we had the burial. They're like, "Hey, let's all kick it together." So we kicking it and we're hanging out at the house, just the cousins. And my cousin that didn't make it, he's like, "Hey, let's play horse." And so we're in the house with this, the baby ball with the hoop that's on the back of a door, and it's not just me, it's like 6 of us playing, and I sucked. I didn't even care that I sucked because I just felt like God heard. And my
Yeah.
brother and that cousin that didn't wasn't able to make it, they were really tight, like really, really tight. And so I knew that it was affecting him too in his own way. And it was just such a beautiful moment. I don't even know if he knows how much like you didn't even hear the speech. And yet that same day
Yeah.
you end up, gravitating like, let's
My,
play this game and
my
having that
family
be how
always
we ended the night.
My
I
family
love
always
it.
says that God is in the details. And he was in the details in the fact that he knew that this was going to be a rough night. Let me make sure that you feel this comfort in some way, shape, and form. And it's crazy. Like I said, I keep this is every time we talk, there's always like, well, dang, like the night of my brother's funeral, my family, we stayed up all night around the kitchen island at my auntie's house, just singing all these songs that we grew up singing. Like,
Oh,
and there's just so much video of us just singing and laughing, and I'm just like, I'm so grateful that God works in the best ways, that we have something positive to look back on from our darkest moments. You have
right.
horse, you have your cousins, you have recognizing how many people loved you and your brother and were willing to step out and do what y'all needed. And same, in my situation, and it's just like you said, you never feel like you're going to be able to speak the glory of God in your darkest moments or feel the joy in your darkest moments. And it's like, God is so good that my heart could be completely broken and I can still find a reason to smile or laugh.
Right.
And yeah, oh man, I feel like everything that you said though is just a beautiful example of how to give it to God, and they'll really trust and believe that he has your best interest at heart, even though life is throwing you things that tells you otherwise, losing your brother, moving and being uncertain and unsure, having to put down things that you thought were for you and realize that okay, maybe they're not, and he's constantly reshaping and reshifting you. And not once did I hear you say that you lost your faith, you stopped believing, you stopped having hope, you got angry, you questioned God, or you got jaded. That is not at all what I've heard from your story. And so it leads me to say my last question for you is, if you had to tell somebody else who is either about to walk this same journey, have experienced something similar, or just a word for anybody, what do you want to tell them?
I think the secret, in my opinion, is cover your ears to the outside noise
Mm,
and fill yourself with as much of God's word as you can. Because during that time, I mean, only a few of my friends, like I had a person that came and stayed with me for a little bit. He'll be able to even say, like, I refuse, like, I bought these headphones during that time. I said, I can't even listen to no thoughts, not my own thoughts, not anybody else's thoughts. I listened to sermon after sermon after sermon after sermon. If it wasn't a sermon, it was gospel music. I never even really listened to gospel music like that. But after that happened, I could not listen to anything, no rap about death, no rap about dying, no rap about drugs, no rap. I had no capacity for nothing. And I didn't want to even listen to anyone's heartbreak song. I didn't even want to hear, I needed hope and I needed words of encouragement. And I needed to kind of just be reminded of who it was that was going to give me the strength and who helped me through the funeral. So that kind of like spiraled me into what I feel like strengthened me more than anything, because during those moments, like life could break you, like life is meant to like really like test you. And I think that when you're in these like, your wilderness or any experience, you need to cover your ears to the outside world and remind yourself, like, I think even Jesus, when he's being tested, he regurgitates the word of God back. Like, you have to be able to recite that back and say, like, because your thoughts are so negative, and your thoughts, like they say, take it captive, because you would never have to take anything captive if everything was for you, you know? It's because the fact that you're going to be thinking things like you said, like, I was too late. I wasn't enough. I betrayed my family. I let down my grandmother. I did this. I shouldn't have moved. I should have done this. And it was like, no, I felt led. And I listened to God. And so I had to keep reminding myself over and over the things I had known God would say, not what my mind was telling me. And so yeah, like, cover your ears. And I don't know if some people like to get some good headphones. I got myself some Beats, and I wore those like crazy until I wore them in the rain and I messed them up. But that was my saving grace. Honestly, it was like, don't wait until Sunday to get a good word. I had to swim in a word. I had to, like, consume that more than I ate food, because at certain points I was not hungry. I just needed, like, I was hungry for something deeper than what food could
You're
provide, something
thirsty
deeper
for,
than,
yeah,
for
yeah.
my spirit.
And they say, and like I said, y'all, this is an example because in a time where it's so easy to turn your back on God, she went running towards him. And the peace and the understanding that clearly God has been providing her ever since has been what's carried her. That's been what's allowed her to talk about her darkest time and then still provide a message for someone else to have hope. Even though we're still living in the grief of the loss that you experienced. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your
Right.
story. I appreciate you. I love you, and I know just how difficult these conversations can be. And so I just appreciate you being willing to be loud about your hard time so that someone else can see God's grace and mercy in your journey and know that they can make it through as well. Y'all, shout out to Saba for being here. Like I said, I knew this was going to be a good one, but I knew that it was also going to be one that was worth it and God would be wrapped up in it. And I truly hope that y'all take something from this conversation, a newfound hope, something to hang on to in your darkest hour, and just know that God will always restore anything that the world thought it took from you, and that his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And that when we give it to him, the peace that surpasses all understanding, which is what Saba was talking about, you will feel that. And so make sure y'all subscribe to this podcast on YouTube at Queen Renny Barnes. But with that being said, let's close this episode out the way that we always do. So, in the words of my late great brother, Sean E. Washington II, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and reflect. It'll be all right. Most of the time, things work out fine if you just relax your mind. Catch us next time. Sending peace and love. Queen Renny out.